She stood drenched in freezing water, her uniform clinging to her skin, her pride burning hotter than fire. The laughter of the men echoed through the Marine training yard. But one man's cruel prank was about to meet a reckoning he'd never forget. What they didn't know was that this woman wasn't just another recruit. She was a combat-tested Marine who had already faced war and loss. And this time, she wasn't fighting for her country. She was fighting for her dignity. If you love your mom and dad, hit that subscribe button and show some love to her, because this story will remind you why strength, respect, and heart always win in the end. It was early morning at Camp Henderson, a Marine Corps base known for its brutal training and even harsher instructors. The sun was barely rising when Sergeant Layla Carter marched into the yard, her boots clicking sharply against the concrete. Her uniform was immaculate, her movements precise, and her eyes steady with the calm confidence of a woman who survived more than anyone around her could imagine. She was one of the few black female Marines to serve in a leadership role after returning from deployment overseas, and she carried herself like someone who had earned every stripe on her shoulder. But that confidence made her a target for some who still clung to their old prejudices, hiding their insecurities behind smirks and whispers. Among them was Officer Grant Mason, a man with a history of mocking those he thought beneath him. Grant was tall, broad-shouldered, and arrogant. He had served long enough to think himself untouchable, the kind of man who mistook cruelty for humor. To him, Layla's authority was an insult, a woman, and a black Marine at that, commanding respect in what he still considered his world. The resentment festered quietly until that morning, when his childish ego pushed him towards something cruel. Layla was leading her squad through drills when Grant sauntered by, his usual grin twisting across his face. He had a metal bucket in his hand, half hidden behind his leg, filled with cold water from the supply barrel. The recruits nearby didn't know what was coming, but a few of them saw his smirk and stiffened. Layla turned to correct a young private's stance. Her back half turned to Grant. That's when it happened. The splash of freezing water exploding over her head, soaking her uniform, her hair, her skin. For a second, silence fell across the yard. The shock of cold shot through her like ice, and her breath caught in her throat. Then came the laughter. Grant threw his head back, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess you needed a wake-up call, Sergeant," he sneered. A few recruits nervously chuckled, unsure what to do, their eyes darting between them. Layla slowly turned, her fists clenched, her face calm, but her eyes sharp like razors. The air shifted. Even the wind seemed to pause. Grant expected her to yell or storm off. Instead, she just stared at him, unblinking. "You think that's funny, officer?" she asked evenly. Her voice was quiet, too calm. He shrugged, still smirking. "Relax, it's just a joke. Don't get all dramatic." That was the moment he crossed the line from arrogance into humiliation. He thought he was untouchable. But Layla had spent her whole life facing men like him. She took one slow step forward, then another. Her boots left small wet prints on the concrete. "You like jokes, huh?" she said softly. "Here's one for you." Before anyone could react, she swung, a clean, powerful right hook that connected squarely with his jaw. The crack echoed across the yard. Grant staggered back, his eyes wide, then fell flat to the ground, out cold. The laughter died instantly. The recruits froze. One young private whispered, "Oh, damn." Layla stood over him, breathing slow and steady. "Anyone else think this is funny?" she asked, her voice low but powerful. No one spoke. The silence was so thick you could hear the distant hum of the flagpole cable clinking in the breeze. She turned, marched to the center of the yard, and barked, "Back to training!" The recruits scrambled, falling into formation instantly. But the story didn't end there. Within an hour, Grant was in the medical wing, his jaw bruised and his pride shattered. He filed a formal complaint, claiming assault. Layla was called to the command office to explain herself. The commanding officer, Colonel Reeves, was a tough man with a reputation for fairness, but also a stickler for discipline. "Sergeant Carter," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you want to tell me what happened out there?" Layla stood tall, her wet uniform still drying in patches. "Yes, sir. I defended my dignity." Reeves raised an eyebrow. "By knocking an officer unconscious?" By reminding him that Marines respect each other, sir, she said evenly. He disrespected me in front of my unit. That's not leadership, it's bullying. Reeves studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he sighed. You know this is going to stir things up. Mason's already got friends in high places. I don't care, sir, she said firmly. I've been through worse than this kind of hate. Later that day, rumors spread like wildfire across the base. Some mocked her, calling her the knockout sergeant. Others whispered admiration. But there was one person who wasn't whispering. Captain Julia Torres, Layla's commanding officer and one of the few who had fought beside her in combat. She called Layla into her office and closed the door. You know this could end your career, she said quietly. They're already talking about a disciplinary hearing. Layla met her eyes. I know, but if I let him humiliate me like that, I'd be letting every woman here down. Torres nodded slowly. You did what most of us wish we could have done, she admitted. But now we have to play this smart. Over the next few days, things took a darker turn. Grant's allies began twisting the story, claiming Layla had attacked him unprovoked, that she had a temper, that she was unstable. Anonymous notes appeared in her locker with words like, know your place. But Layla didn't break. She channeled her anger into training, outperforming every Marine on base. Her strength, her precision, her leadership, everything screamed control. One afternoon, during shooting drills, Grant showed up again, this time with his jaw wrapped and a chip on his shoulder. You got lucky last time, he hissed quietly as they passed. Layla stopped and looked him in the eye. You want to test luck again? She said, voice cold as steel. He smirked but didn't answer. He didn't have to. The tension between them had become the talk of the base. When the disciplinary hearing finally came, the room was packed. Marines lined the walls, waiting to see if justice would be fair or political. Layla stood at attention, her face calm, her heart steady. Grant sat across from her, smirking slightly, his arm in a sling for effect. She assaulted me, he said dramatically, in front of my men. It was unprofessional and dangerous. Colonel Reeves turned to Layla. Sergeant Carter, your response? She took a breath. Sir, I was humiliated in front of my recruits. He poured water over me, laughed, and degraded my authority. My reaction wasn't premeditated. It was instinctual, but it wasn't about violence. It was about respect. If leadership means allowing yourself to be mocked by those under you, then I'm in the wrong place. The room was silent. Then one of the recruits, the same young private from that morning, stood up. Sir, he said nervously, I saw the whole thing. Officer Mason did it on purpose. We all did. And when Sergeant Carter hit him, it wasn't about anger. It was about showing us that dignity matters. She's the reason I stayed in training, sir. Another Marine stood. Then another. Soon, half the room was standing, voicing the same truth, that Layla had become a symbol of strength, not rebellion. Grant's smirk vanished. He tried to interject, but Reeves raised a hand. Enough. He looked at Layla for a long moment, then said, Sergeant Carter, you're dismissed with honor. Officer Mason will be reviewing your conduct immediately. Layla saluted, turned sharply, and walked out. The hallway outside erupted in quiet applause from the younger recruits who'd gathered to see the outcome. She didn't smile, but a small glint of satisfaction flickered in her eyes. She had stood her ground and won. That night, she sat on the barrack steps, watching the sunset streak across the sky. Captain Torres joined her, handing her a coffee. So what now? She asked. Layla smiled faintly. Now I train harder. Because somewhere out there, another woman is going through the same thing. And she needs to know it's okay to fight back. Weeks later, she was reassigned to lead a new unit, one focused on leadership development and integrity training. Ironically, her first lecture was about respect. As she spoke, the recruits hung on every word. Respect isn't given because of rank, she said. It's earned through action. And when someone tries to take it from you, you stand tall. You don't let fear make you small. By the time she finished, the room was silent again, but this time it was out of admiration. The same woman who had been mocked now stood as a symbol of resilience, of pride, and of justice done right. Months later, Grant Mason quietly resigned. No statement. No farewell. Just gone. The Marines moved on, and so did Layla, but her story became legend in that base. New recruits still whispered it at night. The sergeant who knocked an officer out cold. But those who truly knew her didn't tell it as a story of violence. It was a story of power. A story about standing your ground, no matter who tries to bring you down.